YouTube. Listen, I want to go on this rant, rave, rap, whatever you want to call it, riff. Basically, look, just because someone is a bigot of some kind, a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a transphobe, a able-bodied, chauvinist, whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't deserve your violence. They don't deserve your attacks. I'm not talking about criticism. I'm talking about, like, actually hurting them or assuming that you have the right to bring violence to them because you are self-justified in believing this person is committing an act so wrong, I must take action by doing something about it. Or some people even saying it should be made illegal. Look, freedom of speech is not about popular speech. I know you've heard this a bunch of times, and this is pretty elementary, you know. It is elementary, but I see people like Piers Morgan calling for the word nigger to be punishable by jail time. That if a white person says nigger, he can go to jail. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, let me tell you another thing. Just because a person may say nigger or spick or kike or whatever in a person's face that insult corresponds to, doesn't mean that person getting the insult has the right to punch that person in the face. I can understand why they would, but it doesn't give them a right to. And that's what freedom of speech is about. Freedom of speech is not about feeling good. Freedom of speech is about tolerance. And it seems weird when I say you have to be tolerant of people who are with bigoted beliefs, who are essentially intolerant. But what I mean is you don't have to accept their beliefs. But what you should do is let them speak it. It's absolutely wrong to try to censor any speech. Now, I know some speech is okay to censor, i.e. threats or false, like making false statements to get money from people. Not just making false statements. Like you can say that to everyone, I rode in on a unicorn today, and no one can throw you in jail for that. But if you said I rode on a unicorn today and I'll give you a unicorn ride for $500, then yeah, that's illegal. So when it comes to speech which is expressing of opinions and beliefs, no matter how asinine the opinion or how insidious the belief is, we can't bring violence or censorship to it. A person may love Nazis, it may love may love talking about babies dying. As despicable and deplorable as all this is, we can't do anything beyond just criticizing it. We can't bring violence to that person. You know, I see people now with the Confederate flag on private property and people trying to tear it down. What are you doing? They're saying, oh, that's racist. That's a symbol of racism. Well, it doesn't matter. They can have a flag of a noose. It just means don't go there and don't fuck around with them. But to try to go on their property and steal their stuff and vandalize it because it doesn't fit your beliefs, come on, it's ridiculous. That's the definition of intolerance. Tolerance doesn't mean being around a lot of opinions you like and never facing any contradictions or shortcomings. No, tolerance is about being in a sea of different opinions and varying beliefs and being able to hold your own and criticize others, but not stop any of them. I can't help how many times I see on websites like WorldStar, and I'm not saying this is just for black people, but I see someone like calling a black person a nigger, and then the black person will just start wailing on them, beating them up when there was no violence before that. And I just don't think that's justified. I'm not, I think the guy's a jerk and an asshole for calling them that, but to go out and start fighting them, it's ridiculous. The reason why I'm ranting about this is because I feel that this is going to, if anything would ever get rid of freedom of speech in the United States, it would be this issue. People who are offended by speech that's not threatening or conning them in any way. I feel like people would favor getting rid of the freedom of speech if you said it was because of racism or bigotry. So let's get rid of all sexist comments. Well, what's interesting is now in New Zealand this has happened. If a person or a company says anything that offends any group of people, they can get fined as a person $50,000 and as a company $200,000, and may even serve jail time up to 2 to 5 years. I'm not kidding. This is New Zealand. This is a developed nation. This is part of like the G20, and they're doing stuff like this. This is like totalitarian or Orwellian mind control. You cannot say anything that may upset any group of people, or we will throw you in a box. But we are a very tolerant nation. It makes no sense whatsoever. I don't get that at all. I think that's just a huge inconsistency if they believe in a democratic and society with Republican values. I really don't. It just makes no sense to me. No Converge for now. It's a different kind of mood right now. So I do have a problem. I feel like it's going to become a point where it could potentially ruin freedom of speech. It could become something that gets rid of it, just like the Second Amendment, just like the Fourth Amendment. You know, whatever rights are leaving, and you would think at least freedom of speech would stamp it. If we made all speech speech that's never offense gives anyone offense, this would be a totalitarian state of some sort. I mean, if we could just think real quick about how any kind of let's say, you know, if someone says something and you're really upset by it, that offense is always taken. It's never given. What that means is offense is something that the person chooses to engage. People who have thick skin or are able to be more resilient are, in the face of criticism, either accepting of it in some respects, saying I can work on X, Y, and Z, or they just let it run off their back. Well, I mean, like a duck has the water run off its back. You know, I had a social psych class, and the teacher told me, I was talking to her after, and the professor says, well, we were talking about offense, like now, and she said, you know, what if, and this is in the context of microaggressions and unconscious bias and whatnot, that, you know, what if I was sitting next to you in class and I made fun of the way you smelled, and it was something you couldn't change about yourself? Well, actually, first she said, well, you know, what if I made fun of you? And I said, well, is it something that I should check up on? Like I come in with egg on my face or something? But then when you know, she specifically said, no, it's something that you can't change. And I said, so there's this person in class who's making fun of me for something I cannot change, like my height or my nose shape or the fact that, you know, I have this skin color, whatever. And they're making fun of me for that. Why should I respect them? Why should I let their opinion? They're obviously an idiot. If you can't do anything, why are you making fun of me for it? You're a jerk. Why would I want to, like, please you or hear anything from you? To me, at that point, you'd be someone I want to pay no attention to. She had nothing to say after that. You know, it's not easy growing up in the world and interacting with people, but we can't sanitize everything and make sure that no one can ever be offended. That would be the end if we incorporate these kinds of strategies like New Zealand has. It would end freedom of speech and what democratic principles are founded on. Because at that point, offense is a subjective phenomenon, and almost anyone could take offense at anything. Some people are offended by clapping, for God's sakes. I know that story was all over the news back a few months ago, where some feminist had a group meeting or a group festival, I don't know, this feminist gathering, and the people were clapping at a performance, and they said, no, you can't clap. They were tweeting, you can't clap, it's triggering people. Try jazz hands. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, think about that. Just think about that second. Enough people all become offended by something, and something as mundane or banal as clapping after a performance. Clapping after a fucking performance. I mean, for God's sakes. You know, it's not illegal to be a sexist, bigoted person. Those are just the people you don't talk to. They're the ones that you isolate socially. But you can't try to make them lose their job or throw them in jail. That's an invasion. And I know people say, oh, how can you be tolerant of intolerance? No. Tolerance is not when people agree with you. Tolerance is just putting up with others' beliefs. When a person is intolerant, that just means they don't agree with you. What true intolerance means is when you force yourself on someone. That's true intolerance. Not this shit. You know, it's really asinine, and it could really piss me off. But I'm still trying to learn how to use this thing. Well, so to wrap things up, I guess I just, wanted to point out to everyone, be careful. Be careful of people pushing so-called non-tolerant speech under as censored, like censoring any kind of speech. Really, almost no kind of speech should be censored unless it hurts the health or wealth of someone. Oh well, actually, I have another topic I want to hit on really quick. This is basically the problem with this is there's in psychology we have a term in research. It's called content and construct validity. Quickly, validity is just a concept of how true something is in an experiment, and construct validity is whether or not the thing you're studying at that time really reflects the thing you're trying to study. And there's something called content validity, which says whether or not the thing you're studying is relevant to the overall world, right, or to the subordinate, superordinate topic, the topic that encloses it, like what. So, the issue here is bias. Does bias really represent racism? Just because you take an IAT test and you find yourself biased towards your race, does that mean you actually have feelings of racial superiority and feelings that other races are inherently inferior to you? I don't believe so. I don't think there's any evidence for that. So there's a construct really that whether or not studying bias is actually studying racism, and there's a content validity of whether or not we should be studying racism through bias. Bias is unintentional. If you don't think about it, it doesn't mean that you're going to hurt someone or hate someone because of it. It just means that you're more attracted and easier to interact with what you're familiar with. And that's all that means. And we can always change ourselves to become more familiar with things. There's nothing that stops us from it. So you see, there's no reason why just because you have an unconscious bias, you can't work to change it. But it doesn't mean you're racist, because once you call someone racist, you're like shutting the door. It's one of the worst things a person could be in the society, like a true like KKK kind of white supremacist or black nationalist kind of thing. But to call just the average Joe that is incredibly insulting. And what's more insulting is, in the academic world, it's becoming fashionable to say that everyone's racist. In these gender studies, or and even in certain like social psychology circles, I took a social psych class last semester, and they were telling me everyone, not the teacher though, but someone in the class was like, everyone here is racist. And everyone there agreed, and I had to stand up and say that's basically in less words, I said that's BS. Absolute bullshit. How dare you call everyone here a racist? It doesn't make it any better if you call yourself one too. It's like you don't know anything about me. You don't know where I'm from and how I grew up. You don't know anything about that. And yet you have the audacity to call me something as despicable as racist, something as low as thinking that something that's a social construct like race makes people inherently anything beyond just like their perceptions, like how they look. It really, so that's basically my beef. I don't think just because you have a bias means you're racist. Bias and racism are two different things. They're not. One does not entail the other. You can have one without the other. And to like I said, to get technical with it, I call a content and construct validity problem on all these studies that are associating unconscious bias with what they call covert racism. Ridiculous. It's almost Orwellian to tell people there's something when they don't feel that. Really, it is. It just makes no sense. Really, it really sucks, I don't understand why that has to be that way. Well, that's all I want to say. Those two things, basically, about freedom of speech being hurt by people who are offended. Like they might get rid of freedom of speech by making all quote-unquote offensive speech a problem, and this issue of the research into unconscious bias and whether or not that really has a link with racism, which I don't think it does. It doesn't have a link with racism. There's no proof of that. It's just an assumption they're making. Unless they want to start defining racism as something that's unconscious. It's something that we don't choose. Something like our DNA, which would be very scary. So that's pretty much it. I'll leave you guys. Metaself out of here. Well, I'm Metaself and I'm out of here. I don't know if I want to make a real sentence out of it. Have a good one.